All right, everyone, welcome back. I have a couple things I want to share with you in this lesson. I think it's pretty cool, and I think you can walk away with maybe one or two, or maybe even up to 4 or 5 tips that are useful to you as a creative writer. So here's a little background. This excerpt here was written by a student of mine named Adil, who was asked to write in a new genre and in a new style than anything he'd done before. He wrote for about 20 minutes straight, nonstop. And then this was one passage that he liked, I liked, his classmates liked, but we all thought it could be better. So this lesson starts here. All right, so pause the video and read the passage. I'll be here waiting. Okay, welcome back. Read through this too real quick. So pause the video again, read through here, and then I'll see you in a second at this link. Okay, so this document gives us a number of strategies for creating figurative language. And it sounds cool, and figurative language is fun, and it adds a lot of style and maybe some like poetic elements to your writing. But how to do it? So this is a tutorial on how to create comparative figurative language. So I'm going to walk through the steps with you. And we're going to use Adil's piece for this. So here's something you can do with your writing. Go back and look for a moment where you want to raise the tension or where you want to add a little more style to a description. So find that moment and then sort of name what's going on in that moment. And name the moment in simple language. So for example, in the passage I shared with you from Adil, a man has a suddenly itchy throat and then a rat comes out of his mouth. There's a nice simple way to talk about it. Okay, now here's where it gets good. Try to name general characteristics of what's going on in that moment. So specifically, a man has an unforeseen weird feeling in his throat. More generally, this is a sudden unwelcome feeling. Specifically, a man has itching, scratching, tickling, stretching sensation in his throat. That's the specific moment. More generally, this is an example of being physically uncomfortable. Specifically, there's a big rat inside a human throat. More generally, this is something that's too big for the space that it's in. Okay, so we're moving from very specific instances to the more general principles. And stick with it, because this is going to get you somewhere. Okay, so now we start maybe coming up with a list of possible comparisons, a list of possible similes or metaphors or even symbols. So take a minute, please, and look at how steps 3 and 4 fit together. They're color-coded. Okay, so you can pause and read through this. Okay, so welcome back. So you have a large collection of ideas and descriptions and details that could potentially be used figuratively. So go back into Adil's piece, which is right here, and see if you can add a couple similes, or even just one simile. And then after that, see if you can add a metaphor. And to do so, you can just grab some of these items from your list and use those as your comparisons. Go ahead, give it a shot. Hit pause. Okay, and you could have taken as much time as you wanted to there. And the idea is to just play around and have some fun with it. So I want to jump to step 9, and obviously step 8 says you can do that whole process again with like other moments in your story. So here's a way to use symbolism and possibly even identify a potential theme in your story. So what if in the live rat story, you maybe in some of your description of setting, you dropped in, I don't know, like an old pair of jeans, or maybe like a pair of shoes in the dark that are too small, um, or maybe there's some overgrown fish tank or something in a room early in the story, and it just seems like a weird detail, but it's actually adding adding details that sort of accomplish this feeling where things are too big for the space that they're in, which is a feeling of constriction or confinement. Um, so this is a way where you can sort of create a tone or a mood of confinement or constriction, or in this case, I'm using confinement and constriction, but different stories can create different moods. Um, so that might be cool because in a very subtle way, you're creating this confined moment. And what if your issue in this story is actually that that your theme is speaking to? What if you wanted to write a story that says something about confinement or says something about constriction, um, and your story is commenting on that idea in some way? So this is a way to think about what the theme of your story could be. And remember how we got here? We got here just very randomly from a 20-minute free write that this kid Adil did in a genre that was new to him and a style that was new to him. And then we moved from the live rat going through the throat to creating a bunch of possible comparisons here in step 4. And then we realized, oh wow, maybe this is interesting because the rat in the throat is actually an example of confinement, or it's an example of constriction, or it's an example of things that are too big for the space that they're in. And then you could say to yourself, wow, maybe that's what this story is really about. Maybe this is a story about um, someone or something that feels too big for the space that it's in and feels constricted in some way or confined in some way. And then you could say to yourself, I would like my readers to walk away with a theme, a thematic understanding around this issue of confinement or constriction. And my story is somehow going to make a comment of sorts on this idea. So that's just a list of ways that you can play around with this idea. You can add some figurative language, but maybe even some symbols, and maybe even uncover a theme in your story, just seemingly out of thin air. So good luck.